What's up, everybody? Welcome to Active Church. We exist to be active in our faith and our love for others. Our Sunday gatherings are filled with fun, creativity, and life-giving moments. If this is your first time here, grab a first-time guest card in your seat back and take it to the lobby to receive a free gift. Free coffee is available in Guest Central as well. You'll be with us for about an hour, and we want to invite you to join us as we sing, laugh, and engage in this service. At any point, you can feel free to take pictures and share them on social media. In fact, we'd love for you to take out your cell phone and follow us on Facebook, IG, and Twitter at Active Churches. If you have little ones, check out Active Kids just across the way in our family building for a fun, safe environment for your kids to learn and grow. There's even a cry room for parents with newborns to enjoy the service on our live stream. Thanks again for joining us. We'll begin in just a few moments.
Let's stand together as we begin to worship. Come on, will you put your hands together with us? From the front to the back, let's go.
I live my life to the limit, and I'm at the end of the sail. Lost in the edge, but I know below me your love is waiting to catch. I'm falling into you, 'cause no one's gonna love me like you. I've got nothing to lose, so can't someone stop falling into you? The rush I felt in the free fall, as I lost control in my life. Jesus, I felt that you've always had me. Your love is never down. I wanna love you like you love me. I wanna love you like you love me. I'm falling into you, 'cause no one's gonna love me like you. I've got nothing to lose, so can't someone stop falling into you? I wanna love you like you love me.
Come on, put all those hands together with us.
I wanna love you like you love me. I wanna love you like you love me. I wanna love you like you love me. 1, 2, 3, ha! Oh yeah, I'm falling into you, 'cause no one's gonna love me like you. I've got nothing to lose, so can't someone stop falling into you? My God, I'm falling into you, 'cause no one's gonna love me like you. I've got nothing to lose, so can't someone stop falling into you? I'm falling into you. I'm falling into you, my God. I'm falling into you. I'm falling into you. I'm falling into you. I'm falling into you.
Well, welcome again, everyone, to Active Church. How you guys feeling this morning? My name is James. I'm the worship pastor here. And we're excited to welcome you to Active Church. Right now, we'd love, if you would, if this is your first time here, if you grab one of those cards in your seat, that first time guest card, and fill it out. Mari, what are they going to get? You take that to the lobby. We'd love to give you some Active merch for free, just to bless you this morning. Thank you for being here. There's also a baptism card and a time challenge card in your seat back. If you have any questions about those, get one of our leaders, one of our activators. They would love to give you more information about that. How many of you guys were here last week when we did our grit challenge? You guys here for that? We ate some interesting stuff. We had some contestants that ate some chocolate-covered insects on stage. That was pretty intense for our grit challenge. We wanted to raise the bar this week. So Pastor Mike Frisch is actually going to be jumping a motorcycle over some cars in the parking. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, you guys. Don't worry. Don't get scared. Not going to damage your cars today. But we are going to go into a time of greeting. Mara, tell them what to do.
Alright, so let's reach across the aisle now. Give someone a handshake or a hug.
Let's greet one another this morning. Give a hug. We'll be right back. lift your voices with us. Lift your hands. Do whatever you feel called to do as we worship God this morning. I want to direct our attention back to Him. Lead us back breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you. Come on, active church, lift that up. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. Every voice, one more time. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath.
It's your breath in our lungs. We
Pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. We pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. We pour out our praise to you, Lord.
Great are
Oh, great are you, Lord. One more time, boys. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you, holy Lord. Amen. Active Church, so great to worship with you this morning. Right now, go ahead and grab a seat and check out the screen.
Hey, what's up, Active Church? My name is Sean.
And my name is Josh. We want to thank you for joining us today in service and online as well.
We're so excited to see you today, and we've got a free gift for you if this is your first time.
Grab a first-time guest card and take it to Guest Central, located in the lobby, and we'll hook you up with some active merch.
Also located in your seat back is our Tide Challenge cards and baptism cards.
Baptism Sunday is just around the corner, so please hit up one of our activators if you have any questions or need more info on baptism.
We've got some more opportunities to share with you right now, so check it out.
Part of what makes Active Church so special is progressing together in something we call connection groups. These groups are life-giving places where you can grow deeper in faith and relationship with others.
That's right, group signups begin next month, but we're looking for amazing leaders interested in hosting these groups. And all it takes is the willingness to open your home and the ability to start a conversation. That's it.
If you're a connection group host or interested in hosting, we want you to join us today for free lunch at 12:30. And if you can't make it today to 12:30, we've got another one Wednesday, January 17th at 6:30 p.m.
We would love to help prepare you for the chance to host a group. Even if you are considering being a leader, please join us for one of these training sessions.
Also, just around the corner on February 4th is another Baptism Sunday. Woo!
If you've never experienced one of our baptism services, they are absolutely amazing, incredible experiences you do not want to miss.
If you or anyone you know is interested in getting baptized, you can sign up in the lobby today.
That's all for the announcements today. Right now, we're going to enter into a time we call communion.
Our leaders are coming forward, and you will receive a cracker and a cup of juice. If this is your first time in a setting like this, please don't feel pressure to take communion this morning.
For the rest of you, remember, we take communion to recognize Jesus' sacrifice and love for us.
Feel free to participate by taking communion as soon as you receive the bread and juice.
When you are finished, you can find a cup holder near the bottom of the seat in front of you to place your empty cup.
Thanks for being with us today. Our service will continue in just a moment.
Check. There we go. Hey, there we go. Good morning, Active Church. My name is Casey. I'm one of the pastors here, and I want to invite the ushers to come up forward. But I want to tell you guys something that I love about Active Church. And I've been to a few churches in my lifetime, and what I realized is that a lot of churches like to talk about giving and not much more, but here at Active, we love to talk about generosity and a whole lot more. And I want to share what your generosity is providing. Each month, we have experiences here at Active Church for our new guests called First Step and Next Steps. And these experiences are awesome for our new guests that come into Active Church to get plugged in and get to know what the church is about. We get to meet them, and they get to discover what their next step here is at Active Church. And the greatest part about that is your generosity is providing a space for those people to find a home here at Active Church. And what better way to find a home than through these steps and through this process that we have. And you guys are providing a space to do that. And I think back of trying to find a church home, how difficult that can be, but your generosity is providing a space to make that easy, simple, and fast. So thank you so much, Active Church, for providing that space. And as the ushers come forward to pass the buckets, I just want to take some time to pray. God, thank you so much for a church that is on fire for you, God. Thank you so much for these people that are generous here, God, that we get to come together and make people feel at home here at Active Church, God. We ask that this place is always going to be a home for people that are far from you, God, that want to come and meet you, God. We love you. We thank you. In your name I pray. Amen.
Well, good morning, Active Church. How are you? Great to be with you. My name is Mike. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're honored that you would come and hang out with us this weekend. We launched a series last week. We're in week 2 of a series we're calling Grit, and how life is more like a marathon and not a sprint, right? And we wanted to talk about what it means to live with grit in 2018. Angela Duckworth is the one who has really done some work with this word. Grit is a cultural buzzword, and she wrote a book about it. She's done speeches about it, and she talked about what grit is, and here's the definition of grit. It's passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. And so passion is the conviction that this is the best way forward, and perseverance is that you are going to rise to the occasion, and you're going to accomplish whatever the goal is that you set for yourself. Now, I know when we come to this time of the year, the beginning time of the year, we like to talk about goals, but let's be honest. A lot of us probably struggle with setting those goals because goals, what comes along with goals are intimidating words like start and finish, right? Because we're going to have to start something. And maybe for us, we really have great intentions, but we got to get started at some point, and that can be scary because it might mean for you that a lot's going to change. And then you think about, well, what if I don't finish it? What if I don't accomplish it? And I already don't feel good about myself, and then if I don't accomplish this thing, I'm not going to feel good about myself at an even lower level, at an even worse level. And so I don't know if I even want to accomplish these goals. I don't know if I want to even set a goal. I don't even know if I want to even think about a goal. But grit says that goals aren't just about starting and finishing. Grit says that goals are about taking a step, taking one step forward. You ever heard the phrase, 2 step forward, 1 step back? Here's what's great about that phrase. Even though you've taken 1 step back, you've still taken 1 step forward, haven't you? You've taken some ground. And what setting a goal does for you and what it does for me is it allows us to go, well, I can do that. I can take that step. And you might find yourself on the roller coaster of making decisions. You might find yourself on the roller coaster of deciding what it is that you want to do today and what that step might look like. But ultimately, setting goals is you taking a step forward. So maybe it would be better for you to hear goals, not just in start and finish, but maybe it would be better for you to hear goals in more of direction. We're choosing a direction, a path forward for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we still don't need help with those goals in that direction, right? In fact, when it comes to direction, I am the complete worst at it. Wherever we go, no matter what we do, vacations, road trips, whatever, there is a common word that you will hear on every trip that my family and I take, and it's this word: recalculating. Because for some reason, I always seem to get lost. I always seem to get lost. It was just about a year ago that my wife and I were going up to the mountains, and I was going to speak at a camp. And it had just snowed, and so we were going to have to find the camp, and we were going to have to navigate snow, and we knew all this. And so my wife, because she's been married to me for 16 years, she knew that she was going to take some precautions, and so we had a GPS, and we had her phone. And so I thought, piece of cake, we're going to be fine. And we drove up to the mountains, and we had a great conversation, and then it happened. We passed the left-hand turn that we were supposed to take, and the GPS said, recalculating. And so my wife looked at me with a smirk on her face, and I said, I got this, honey. Don't worry about it. And I saw just up ahead a left-hand turn that I could make, and I thought to myself, if I make that left-hand turn, I could spin around, and I could get back on the main highway, and then the left-hand turn that we missed would become a right-hand turn, and we'll find the place, and it'll be fine. And so I made the left-hand turn, and our GPS said, recalculating. What I discovered is that when it snows in the mountains, that they plow the main roads, but some of the side roads only get partially plowed. And when I pulled into this road, my lane was plowed, but the lane next to me wasn't. So my turnaround wasn't gonna happen. So I got the brilliant idea, and I told my wife, what I'll do is I'll just back up. And there was enough room at the stop sign. I'll just back up, I'll spin around, we'll pull back out, I'll make the right-hand turn, everything will be fine. And as I'm explaining this brilliant idea to my wife, somebody pulls in behind me. So at this point, I was like, they're gonna have to move. They flashed their lights at me. I pumped my brakes back at them. They flashed again. I pumped my brakes, and finally my wife was like, Michael, and that's when I knew I was in trouble. She said, just go forward. We'll figure it out going forward. And so because I love being married to her, I decided, we'll just do that. So I put the car in drive, I moved forward, and I noticed that there was a road that connected this road to this road over here that could take us back, and that'll get us out of here. And I told my wife, this is what we're gonna do. And so I hit my right-hand turn signal, and I turned onto that road, and my GPS said, recalculating. And when I got on that road, do you remember when I told you about how they plow certain roads and they don't plow other roads? Well, I discovered that my Honda Odyssey is not a 4x4. And we hit the road that felt like we were driving across the Antarctic. Snow was plowed. At one point, we're sliding to one side. At the other point, we're sliding to another side. I looked at my wife, and she grew up a Catholic, hasn't been a part of the Catholic Church in years. She was praying the rosary during this moment. And I believe at one point, as we're sliding across the road, my GPS stopped saying recalculating, and it just said, good God, Mike, what are you doing? And by the grace of God, we made it to the end of the road. I turned my right turn signal on, and we got out to another road, and then I realized here's the main road. I turned my right turn signal on and went out to the main road, and we were back on track. And I looked over at my wife and I said, see? And everywhere we go, it always seems like I need some help with direction. I always seem like I find myself getting lost. And here's what I know about getting lost, and maybe you can relate to this. There's three things about getting lost. First, we don't get lost on purpose, do we? We're not planning on getting lost. I mean, we had a GPS and the phone ready to lead the way. I wasn't planning on getting lost, and maybe you weren't planning on getting lost. Second thing is, we don't know when we're getting lost, do we? I mean, you may have had a moment, I know that I have, where I've been lost, but I was driving with confidence. I still had one arm on the steering wheel, had the other arm around my wife. Everything was fantastic. And then there's that moment where you realize you're lost. And then you do what everybody does, right? You turn the radio volume down. Like, how does that help you, right? And then you begin to whisper. Because when you're lost, you whisper. And I didn't know I was lost until I knew I was lost, and then anxiety started to rise in me. And then the third thing about getting lost is that whatever road you're on determines where you end up. And that one's good, right? That one's good for all of us to understand. That one's good for us to just let it marinate for a minute, right? Whatever road you're on determines where you end up. Maybe a better way to say it is this, that the path determines the place. The path that you take determines the place you end up. And often, for many of us, there's a disconnect in that principle, isn't there? Because we think that maybe if we're just really good people, or we think that maybe if we just have really good insight, or we think if we just have really good intentions, we'll get to where we need to be, when in reality, we didn't arrive there at all. And we're wondering, how did I get here? How did I arrive here? Why did this bring me here? But here's the truth, and I don't want you to miss this. We should never be surprised where we end up, because we're making decisions today to end up where we'll be tomorrow. And we should never be surprised if we end up addicted, if we're making choices to say yes to our addictions today. We should never be surprised if we end up broken, if we're making choices to not choose healing today. And we should never be surprised if we end up bitter, if we're making choices to be angry today. And here's the thing that I've learned, and maybe you've learned this along the way in this principle of the path, is that good intentions don't lead you anywhere. And we all have really good intentions. I have good intentions. Do you have good intentions? We all have good intentions. We all have moments where we're like, well, I wanted this to go in a different direction. That's great, but your good intentions, they don't lead you anywhere. And they end up just keeping you lost. And here's what I know about our lostness. We live in a culture where we embrace our lostness. In fact, there is a time in our culture for us to be lost, isn't there? And we find other lost people and we rally together and we use language like, hey, it's okay to not be okay. You've heard that here, and it's a true statement, and it's a good statement. And what we do in our lost moments is we go, well, listen, we're all lost together, so let's just kind of discover who we are first. And it's a good moment. But here's what I know is true about me, and I would assume is true about you. We don't want to stay lost. We don't want to live there forever. And so just as if there is a time to be lost, there is a time to be found. And you and I, we have goals and desires and things that we want to accomplish in our life. And I know that even if we embrace our lostness for a time, in that embracing of our lostness, we want to find a way out. And that's what I love about God, is he connects us to someone who's good with direction. And as you've learned, I really need that. And maybe you do too. His name is Jesus. And Jesus said that he came for a specific purpose. In fact, in Luke, he said this, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." He came to seek and to save what was lost. That he knows the way forward, because he knows you and knows me best. And he does this in two specific ways. First, he does it in his words. His words are powerful. In fact, Jesus said that in this world, you will have trouble. You will get lost. But take heart. I have overcome the world. What I love about the words of Jesus is that he empowers us with his words. He speaks about who we are and what we were created to be. That you're loved. That you're forgiven. That you're chosen. That you're cherished, that you're God's masterpiece. And he speaks about how you're empowered. He speaks about your purpose. and he covers you in like an archway filled with words that empower your soul and fill your heart and mind with purpose. But not only does Jesus do this in his words, he backed it up in his action. Do you know that it was the resurrection of Jesus that changed everything for the early church? It wasn't their belief in something. It wasn't their religious practices. It was that Jesus was dead on a Friday and was alive on a Sunday. That's what changed everything for them. And it was Paul that actually writes about this. And listen to his words as he writes to Christians 25 years after Jesus rose from the grave. He said, if Christ had not been raised, our preaching is useless. Our words are pointless. And so is your faith. And you are still in your sins. Or in other words, you are still lost. If the resurrection of Jesus is not true. If it didn't happen. That's what changed everything for the first Christians. And it also changed history. There are secular, agnostic, and atheistic scholars that would acknowledge that the tomb of Jesus is empty and that the first Christians acknowledged that the tomb of Jesus was empty. Bart Ehrman, he is a professor of religious studies at North Carolina University. Bart said this, Paul indicates that this is what they, the first followers of Jesus, this is what they claimed. Their claim was the resurrection. And listen to his words, and I don't think he's making it up. He's not a Christian. He's an atheist, maybe an agnostic. And he says there was an empty tomb. And so he even acknowledges that we have to deal with that. And what the writers of the Bible would want us to know, what Jesus himself would want us to know, is this great truth, that everything we need, Jesus already is. That everything that you need in life, Jesus already is. That everything that I need in life, Jesus already is. Peter, one of the early followers of Jesus, wrote this about this very principle in his letter in 2 Peter. He says, God's power has given us everything we need for life and for godliness. It isn't something you earn. It isn't something that you just work to get. It's something that is given to you that you can say yes to and you can begin to engage because God has empowered you when you have trusted Jesus. And it was Paul that affirms this in a letter called Romans. He says this, that in all these things, in this life that we live, in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loves us. That when things become overwhelming for us, that Jesus is greater. That when things are starting to build anxiety in us, that Jesus is greater. That when sin, when depression, when brokenness is leading the way, that Jesus is greater. Everything we need, Jesus already is. And that's the life that is described as grit or gritty. And what I've learned, and maybe what you're beginning to learn, is that becoming better starts with trusting that Jesus has the ability to get us from where we are to where we want to be. Becoming better is trusting that Jesus is great with direction and that Jesus is great at recalculating the decisions that we've made and joining us in the space to move forward to become what he created us to become. And it was never more clear than in a moment in the life of Jesus where he was actually asked to do one thing, but then something else happened. A man comes to Jesus and begs Jesus to heal his child. And the writer, his name is Luke, Luke tells us that Jesus is moved with compassion and he goes on his way to heal this kid. And that's the story. But then there's like this subplot. There's like this best supporting actress moment that shows up. And Luke tells us that while Jesus is on his way, something happened. Here's what he said. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. Now, scholars tell us that this bleeding for 12 years is a particular female issue, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, all right? And she's dealing with this and all that goes along with it for 12 years straight. And it wasn't as if she was trying not to get help, because she was, because it says that no one could heal her. Maybe you've been to the doctor before and they just can't figure out what's wrong. Maybe you just haven't been feeling good and you're wondering why you haven't been feeling good. And you know the anxiety and the frustration and the worry that rises up in you, doesn't it? Maybe you're connected to somebody that's going through a very similar situation where they just can't find the right diagnosis and get the help that they need, and you just feel helpless. And so physically this woman is struggling, but mentally she's struggling as well. But even a third layer shows up. There's a spiritual layer to this. Because this woman is in a very religious culture, in a very, very religious system. She's a good Jewish woman. And in their culture, they took the laws of God and then they would add to the laws of God. And so what was intended to help the first followers of God understand what it meant to follow God became heavy and hard and difficult and almost unimaginable to try to follow. One of the things that she was under in the spiritual realm, in the religious realm, was this uncleanliness situation that she had to deal with. And one of the letters, the first letters of the Bible in Leviticus, it says this about her uncleanliness. It says, anyone who touches her will be unclean until evening. Now, what God was teaching the first followers of God was what it looked like to move from death to life, what it looked like to move from unholy to holy, what it looked like to move from isolated to community, what it looked like to be sons and daughters of God. But over the years, religion started taking over, and the practices of religion started taking over, and they began to use these as burdens upon people rather than setting people free. And so this woman, for 12 years, was unclean. And no one could touch her. And she couldn't touch anyone. One of my love languages, how I know that I'm loved by my family, is physical touch. I'm a hand holder. I'm a cheek kisser. I'm a snuggler. I told my kids, I don't care how old you get, you're going to snuggle daddy. It's just going to happen. And what I love is that they haven't fought me on that yet. And I love that. When I come home, they run, give me a hug. When we're at the dinner table, we hold hands. Last night, we went out to dinner, and my son, my 12-year-old son, grabbed my arm and just wanted to walk with me. Man, there's nothing like that. You and I both know that the physical moment where we can grab a hold of someone and embrace them, it's a powerful moment. Even for those of you that aren't great at that, even for those of you that are a little bit uncomfortable with that, there's something that just melts your heart in that moment. And imagine this woman for 12 years not being able to embrace maybe her husband or her kids because they would be unclean. Unclean really meant three things for her. First, it meant isolation. She was by herself. She was away from people. Author and speaker Brene Brown talks about connection and isolation in this way. She said this: the need for connection makes the consequences for disconnection that much more real and dangerous. Psychologists will tell us that after a few days of being isolated, we can lose the ability to interact with one another because we just haven't flexed that muscle. And it actually can wear us down physically, to where you are put back into a situation with people, you just don't have the energy to do it, the strength to do it, or the mental capacity to do it. And for 12 years, this woman is isolated. Not only that, then if she was ever to find healing, she would have to make some sort of offering or sacrifice to get back into the good graces of the culture. She would have to go to the priest and prove that she's been healed of this situation, and then she would have to make some sort of sacrifice before God to say that she was healed. This was a step that she would have to take. And then the third thing that unclean meant was that she would have to go through some sort of cleansing ritual. She would have to change her clothes. She would have to wash her body. In fact, in some cases, you would even have to shave your head. Now, for some of you, you're like, well, that's not a bad thing because bald is beautiful, right? And two of our greatest activators here at Active Church wear their baldness with pride, right? But for this woman, all of these things were a limitation. All of these things got in the way. It was pastor and author Erwin McManus that talks about limitations, and he said this, that the limitations that you are willing to accept establish the boundaries of your existence. That when you say, this is just how I am, and I just am going to be this way, and I'm just going to decide these things, and that's it, and I'm not ever going to, I will never be able to. You've decided what the limits are around your existence. And this woman, she wasn't going to settle for that. And so she set out on a path to take her to a different place because she didn't like the place she was in. Because for 12 years, she's having to deal with this. And we get a kind of a clue, and you'll find out in just a minute why we got a clue, but we get kind of a clue that this woman is a good Jewish woman. And she knows her Hebrew scriptures really well because of her interaction with Jesus. See, the Jewish people believed that the Messiah was going to come and he was going to be the savior of the world. And so everybody would talk about it. All the writers of the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, would talk about this Messiah coming. One of them, his name was Malachi. He was a prophet. And Malachi said this, "But for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings." He talks about how the Messiah is the Son of Righteousness. And he will rise up with healing in his wings. And I highlighted the word wings because that's an interesting word in the Hebrew scriptures. In Hebrew, the word is kanaf. Say kanaf. God bless you. Sounds like a sneeze, right? The word kanaf means edge. The edge of this Son of Righteousness, the edge of this Messiah will bring healing in its wings. The kanaf will bring healing, the edges. And so what they did is that they would take prayer shawls and put them on, and on the corners of their prayer shawls, they would have tassels hang down. Or the jackets or cloaks that they would wear, they would hang prayer shawls down from these jackets and these cloaks, and they would have tassels on the end of it, and it would be a representation that God is holding me together, that he is on the edges of my life and holding me together. But they also believed that when the Messiah shows up, that if you just touched the edges of his outfit or his clothing, that you would find healing. And so here's this woman, bleeding for 12 years. And she set out on a new path to lead her to a new place, to find the Messiah. And if Jesus was the Messiah, then what she was about to do will work in her mind. And here's what Luke says. She came back behind him and touched the, what's the word? Edge. She touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped because she found the Messiah, because she found Jesus. And in that moment, in the snap of a finger, she went from lost to found. She went from outcast to community. She went from rejected to accepted because she found the one that everybody was waiting for. And what she teaches us is that courage outside begins with confidence inside. Not confidence in yourself, but confidence in the one that can heal the self, and that is Jesus. And this woman said, I'm tired of my path that leads to this place. I'm choosing a new path that leads to a new place, and so I'm going to be confident that he is the Messiah. He is the one that we've been waiting for, and I'm going to be courageous and step out. Remember, this culture didn't esteem women. And so for her to even be in that environment was bad. She was also labeled unclean. and she went near a holy man. But she had confidence that led to courage. And the writer of Hebrews tells us about what this looks like in our lives. He says this, that let us approach the throne of grace, or the throne of Jesus, the throne that's filled with gifts, with confidence. The word confidence in the Latin is 2 words. It means with faith. So you could read this, let us approach the throne of grace with faith in Jesus, with faith in the Messiah, with faith in God, so that you may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. This woman chose a new path, and her path looked this way. I'm going to find Jesus. I'm going to trust Jesus, not just believe in Jesus, but I'm going to believe him, and then I'm going to follow him, because your path determines your place. She had a plan and she enacted her plan. She didn't wait and say, well, I have really good intentions and I want to get better. She actually took a step forward. She risked failing. She risked embarrassment. She even risked imprisonment. She risked all of these things because she was tired of the path and the place that she was in, and she decided that there was a new path and a new place, and she was going to take advantage of that. She made a plan, and she enacted that plan. And it's speaker and author Bob Goff that says that no one will be remembered for what they just planned to do. You and I won't be remembered for our plans. We'll be remembered for what we did. And then we come back to the story. She touches the edge of the cloak of Jesus, and Jesus responds with this question: who touched me? Who touched me? And it says, and everybody denied it. It wasn't me. I was over here. I didn't. Almost like it's like the back of your car when you have kids, right? He's touching me. No, I'm not. Like this is the argument that's happening right now. And then Peter, brilliant Peter goes, and I love that he starts off with, Master, I'm about to insult you right now, but Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. Have you ever been in a big, giant, large crowd? Like many of you probably just saw this photo and now you're breathing heavy, right? You need a brown paper bag to breathe into. You need to take your little breath thing and, okay, I'm better now. When you're in a crowd like this, you don't know who's bumped into you and who isn't. You don't know, really in a crowd like this, you get to know strangers really well. Whoa, is that your hand, right? Excuse me. And here's what's happening in this situation with Jesus. It's a big, giant crowd. And Jesus goes, who touched me? And they're like, dude, we don't know who touched you. You're in this huge crowd. And then Jesus responds this way. He says, someone touched me, and I know that power has gone from me. Somebody in this crowd has confidence. Somebody in this crowd just said yes to courage. Somebody in this crowd has strong faith, and I want to know who it is. And Luke says that this woman realizes that she can't hide anymore. And so for the second time today, she steps out. And it says that she begins to explain that she had this path that led to this place, and she wanted to find healing. And so, Jesus, it was me. And the results are beautiful. Jesus responds this way: unclean woman. No. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace for the first time in 12 years. Your faith has healed you. Take a breath for the first time in 12 years. Your faith has healed you. Relax for the first time in 12 years. Give a hug for the first time in 12 years. Give a kiss. Hold a hand. Your faith has healed you. And in this moment, she went from a random girl to a daughter. Because your path determines your place. Your path determines your place. We should not be shocked at where we end up, because we're making decisions today to end up there. And so that day when you end up there could be a day that you're celebrating, or it could be a day that you never want to do again. And this woman decided, I'm going to choose a path that starts with confidence in Jesus, that leads to courageous decisions outward, because my path determines my place, and I want my place to be next to him. I want to be a son or a daughter. I want to be a child. I want to be a part of the fam. That's who I want to be. Maybe that's why you showed up to church today, because you're tired of your path and you don't like your place. And so when you think about being gritty in 2018, what's the goal look like for you? And before you answer that, a couple of questions. Is the goal safe? Or is the goal faith? Is the goal safe? I can do it. Or is the goal with confidence in the one who created you that leads to courageous decisions? Is the goal reachable? Maybe you've already reached it. You just haven't announced it to anybody yet. And you can go, oh yeah, I already did that. Yeah, 2 weeks in, January 2018, conquered it. Or is the goal attainable? And what I mean by attainable is that it's going to stretch you. Is the goal good? Or is it great? At Active Church, we have a goal for those that are part of our church. And our goal for those that are a part of our church is to move from being a fan to a founder. Now, you may not understand what those words look like, so I'm gonna share with you what those words look like from a very awesome cultural reference. You ready? A fan of Star Wars says that the greatest bad guy in Star Wars is Kylo Ren. But a founder of Star Wars says, sit down, rookie. Let me tell you about the best bad guy in all of Star Wars folklore. His name is Darth Vader, and he was Anakin Skywalker, and he became Darth Vader because he got manipulated by the dark side, and he's the grandfather of Kylo Ren. So let me tell you about that. See, a fan applauds. A founder celebrates. A fan says, I like what's happening. A founder says, look what we're doing. A fan says, that church, that's a great church. A founder says, my church is awesome. A fan says, those people, they're really loving. A founder says, it's my family. And you wouldn't find me anywhere else, because this is where God is working in my life, right? And so for those that are first-timers to those that are long-timers in the room, any of us can move from being a fan to a founder. And what we've done as a church is we've given you 3 options to really consider today. And we want to have you consider this. We're going to pause and really process. And then we're going to challenge you to reach out, just like this woman reached out. We're going to challenge you to reach out and move, take a step from being a fan to being a founder. And you can do it in 3 ways. 1, maybe for you, it's time for you to take your next steps. And we have an experience called Next Steps that happens every Sunday at 9 a.m. just across our courtyard. And at Next Steps, you learn about how you were wired and you were designed and how you were created to connect in community. Because often we know that we're gifted in some way, or maybe we kind of struggle with that knowing. What we do at Next Steps is we affirm what God created, and we invite you to not just fill a hole, but to live with passion and perseverance and in your gifting. So that when people get baptized, you can go, I don't know their name, but I helped create that story because I'm a founder here. Because you served in some way, you gave in some way, you invested in some way. Maybe for you, it's connection group time for you. Moving from isolation to community is a really difficult thing for a lot of us, because we're in a world where isolation is normal and community is not. And maybe for you, it's time for you to jump into a community of some sort, to try it out, to see what God would do in your story and in the stories of the people around you. See, we believe at Active Church that you showed up and there's part of your story that somebody else needs and you probably haven't met them yet. But when you step out, when you reach out, you're allowing God to use your story to help encourage and empower somebody around you. And maybe for you, it's baptism. Our next baptism Sunday is February 4th, Super Bowl Sunday. It could be a Super Soul Sunday for you, right? I just felt like Oprah right there for a moment. Super Soul Sunday. Because we believe in life change around here because God is a life changer. Maybe for you, it's time for you to take a step towards baptism. 2018 will be different when you live with grit. And I want you to sit and process and think about each of those steps. And maybe for you today could be a different day for you. Your path could be different and your place will be different because you decided to reach out today. So here's what I want to do. I just want to pray some words over you. And then I want to encourage you to process what it looks like for you to take a next step. And we're going to sing a little bit. And as we leave today, we want to challenge you to reach out. Let me pray some words over you. God, I'm so honored and so grateful to be a part of this church, to be in the presence of those that are sitting in this room, to be hanging out with those that are watching online, to be a part of their lives, and to see you move us from being people who are afraid to people who are confident, and allowing that confidence to lead us to a courageous decision. And so in the next few moments as we sing together, God, would you stir in us what it is, what step it is that we can take today so that we can choose a path that leads to a place where you call us sons and daughters. In Jesus' name, amen.
Praise will rise to Christ our King. Sing it out. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. Your name I call to declare your victory. The resurrected King, one more time. Resurrecting me by your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. Yeah, is resurrecting me. Oh,
Just take a breath and let God speak to your heart. I don't know what it is for you, but there's a sense in the room that we're all ready to just run a marathon, right? We're all ready to go. Maybe some of you might need a piggyback to get there, but maybe we're ready to go. And so what we've decided to do is we wanted to end today by inviting you to reach out. And you'll see as you leave today that each of the doors are color-coded. And they represent steps that you can take. And if you want to reach out and take next steps, you'll walk through the orange door. If you want to reach out and join a connection group, you'll walk through that center door, the red door. And if baptism is something that's stirring in you, you'll walk through the blue door. Now, I realize that maybe today you're not ready to take those next steps and to reach out, and so as you walk through, nobody's going to watch you and go, oh, you didn't take a card. That's not going to happen, all right? But we wanted to create a space for you because remember we talked last week, if you were here, that God creates a space for us to navigate what it means to pursue God. And so we wanted to create a space for you as you leave today to grab a card, to consider what it looks like for you to take a next step, consider what it looks like for you to jump into a group, and to consider what it looks like to choose to move from death to life in baptism. And once you grab those cards, there's tables set out in the lobby. We have activators at those tables. They'd love to have a conversation with you. You can sign the card and just leave it, and we'll connect with you this week. But we believe in you because we believe in our God. And when we say that the best is yet to come, we don't just mean that for the whole church, we mean it personally for you because you matter. You matter to us, but more importantly, you matter to God. And so church, we want to invite you to reach out and to take a next step, to join a group, or to choose to get baptized today. So you are dismissed. We love you. God bless you. Have a great rest of the week.
presence.